This episode sets itself aside from the previous 11 episodes of El Flow Season 2. As our great season finale, we decided to feature a full interview with one of our favorite artists. You'll be listening to a bit less of us and more from an incredibly talented singer and actress. Our guest today has music in her blood. She was born in San Jose, the daughter of an undocumented family, but she grew up in San Diego. Like thousands of kids in that situation, she took shelter in music as a way to better understand a world that can go from awkward to openly hostile. It wasn't easy for someone like her. But she made it far. She went on to become one of the most celebrated female rappers of her generation. And she's one of the few to do it in Spanish and English. Ella es la mexicana con tremendo flow, Claudia Feliciano, better known as Snow Tha Product. She began in 2009 when Jamie Cohen, a Mexican pop artist, invited her to collaborate in his single, Alguien. Ever since then, her career has only risen. She got signed with Atlantic Records in 2016, releasing successful singles Play, Doing Fine, and Hola. In 2017, she recorded a track with Residente, Kanan, and Riz MC titled Immigrants, We Get the Job Done, which got nominated for the Best Fight Against the System in that year's MTV Music Awards. In 2018, she decided to drop out of this major record label and has since worked as an independent artist, working with a select group of family and friends. Her collaboration with Bizarrap in the 39th of his critically acclaimed music sessions has more than 165 million plays on Spotify and was nominated for the Best Rap Hip-Hop Song on the 2021 Latin Grammys. Her unparalleled, socially conscious, bilingual lyrics have taken her to tour extensively through the US, Latin America, and Europe, while also being extremely active on her podcast, TikTok, and YouTube channels. We sat down to interview Snow Tha Product for the great finale of El Flow Season 2 because we consider her as one of the most successful and badass artists in the urban music scene right now, and one you need to get to know. She sums up what we've been saying in all of our previous 11 episodes. To make it big in this game, you need to fight, work hard, have ambition, talent, and courage. I am your host, Lilia Luciano, and this is El Flow Season 2, Episode 12, Snow Tha Product. This interview was conducted by the producer and writer of the season, Álvaro Céspedes, from a studio in Mexico City, while Snow was working in Miami.
My name's Snow Tha Product. My real name's Claudia. I'm an artist. What is it? I don't know, bilingual. Like, am I supposed to act like I'm in a dating show right now? I'm 5'2". Nah, I'm an artist, and I do different things, but for the most part, I'm known for being a good bilingual rapper.
Well, thank you very much for joining us in El Flow. I would like to start off by asking a little bit about you, about what made you the artist you are today, no? You come from a family of mariachi singers. Like, what music were you obsessed when you were growing up? What did you listen to?
I listened to, my younger days, obviously a lot of Spanish music, because that's how I was raised, with a lot of Spanish music. But, as I started to become a teenager and stuff, I listened to a lot of, 90s rap and R&B. 90s rap and R&B was really the whole thing that inspired me wanting to even do music. Big Pun and Lauryn Hill and a lot of artists that I looked up to. Eminem, they just were really, really dope rappers. So, yeah.
Music in rap in Spanish as well, or just mainly in English?
Mainly in English. Other than El General, obviously, I was a big El General fan. I did like reggaeton and reggae, dance hall. But yeah, the first music I was listening to was a lot of Biggie and East Coast rap and R&B. Anything Timbaland produced or Missy produced, Aaliyah, Genuine. Yeah.
And what about film or TV? What were you into those days?
Regular kid, what everybody's watching. I think, one of my favorite movies is Drop Dead Fred. There's a lot of just regular, I don't know, movie-wise, I feel like I've just watched whatever comes out. I like romantic comedies. I think they're funny. I would like to be in one day.
And what was the turning point in your life when you decided to, become what you are today, a consolidated artist?
I think I just started one day and then I just never really finished. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just was like, okay, I'm going to start rapping and, I'll know when I get there. And that was pretty much it. I always liked music. I didn't think I was going to do music for a while, but when I finally just decided to try it, I don't know. I just, one foot in front of the other and just kept going.
And when did you start, writing in verse?
That was pretty early because the reason I really started was because I would write down like, bars like on a notebook. I would freestyle at that time too, but I like to kind of get my thoughts and like my frustrations out on paper. So writing was the first thing that I did that made me feel better. And so, I don't know, I always kind of wrote.
What made you frustrated back then?
We were poor. We didn't have really money. But my parents had just gotten the divorce. We didn't really have money. We had low income housing in the suburbs. So I was around people who had a decent amount of money, but like we didn't. So it was just a little, I don't know, I guess as you're growing up, your parents are both, well, at the time, one of my parents was still undocumented. The other one had just became a resident. There was a lot of just different issues that was difficult and frustrating to deal with, from family to generational trauma to just problems. And I just, first generation American, just frustrated. Like my family didn't really understand it because I was the oldest granddaughter that was born in the U.S. So like they just thought I was just this chola gangster, like, bad kid. But they also didn't understand that I was growing up in the U.S. So they'd compare my life to their life, but we lived completely different lives.
We'll be back with more of Snow the Product after a short break. We're back in our final episode of El Flow Season 2. Álvaro Céspedes, our producer and writer for this season, had a conversation with Snow the Product, one of our favorite bilingual artists right now. Here's more of that interview. So,
the first episode of this season of El Flow is all about women in the music industry, specifically in the urban genre, and how these women are the ones bringing mostly LGBTQ representation and visibility to the scene, no?
Mm-hmm.
And you're one of the big ones.
Thank you.
What was the decision of being openly queer? Was it something you thought about a lot, or did it just come naturally as part of your self-representation?
I think if you try to just be open but not talk about it too much, people think you're hiding it. So once you kind of come out publicly, I think you end up somehow doing it very proudly, which bothers people, but you do it because people try to put you down for it. You know what I mean? So it's like, it just becomes this like protective way of just like being able to be authentically yourself and show people that, their opinion doesn't matter. Because, by being queer, like some people are just going to be bothered regardless. Like you don't even need to say much. They're already just not going to like you. So we have to kind of represent. The representation really matters. And especially since for queer women, at least, there's a lot of people that clout chase or queer bait by being, by talking queer things. Whereas men kind of don't really do that. Like I don't really see a guy pretending to be gay for views, but it happens more in women. So I think for those of us that really live this life, that really have been in danger because of this life, that really have gone through a lot of really messed up stuff, I think it's important for us to really voice our representation.
This kind of brings me back to one of your lyrics in your song Que Oso. It kind of describes what it's like living in a family that, one day is in church, but then the next one is kind of being doble cara, as we say in Mexico, no? What was it like growing in a family, being queer in a migrant family, Mexicans?
I feel like, for Mexicans, at least I know in our culture and in our family, they take your biggest insecurity and they make it your nickname, so like everything that they could possibly talk crap about, they did. And, for them, it's just like, oh, it's fun. It's just being funny. It's just being silly. But for like a really emotional kid like I was, it just turned into like a lot of resentment, like a lot of like looking for acceptance or looking for, my tribe. and I knew that it wasn't necessarily going to be my family. I tried. I mean, I cried a lot, wanting to have that connection and wanting to explain that there's got to be a better way that we can get along. But unfortunately, you finally realize, okay, that's not really going to be the case. So I found, I took my brother, my cousin, a couple people from my family that I still talk to. But other than that, I realized that throughout this life, I'm just going to have to go find my people. And I feel like I have good friends. I have a good support system. I have good teammates on my team that do really well. So I'm not missing anything. You know what I mean? Like, I say hi maybe to family members once a year or something, if even that. But I didn't. Muchas veces la gente trata de tell you, family's everything. You got to stick to your family. Like, you have to. And it's just like, dude, if people don't treat you right, you don't have to stay anywhere. Like, you can keep going. And I think that was very important for me teaching my son and teaching, people I love that, you don't have to stay anywhere you're not appreciated.
And did you find this appreciation and, this love outside of your family and your community, growing up?
Yeah, absolutely. I have some fans that, I cry to this day when I see them be so passionate about my career. I feel honored and humbled to have people that care about me so much. I've seen what real, love and friendship is like. So the bar is set where it's set, and anyone that doesn't meet those requirements doesn't need to be around me, and sometimes that'll make people be like, oh, eres creída, o qué pasó, like, you don't talk. And it's like, well, no, it has nothing to do with my, my like status. It has everything to do with just going out there and finding better. That's it.
I like it that you kind of switch languages in your answers. And I think that that's one of your biggest talents, while rapping, that you can switch the language in which you're singing almost kind of seamlessly,
Thank you.
And the things you say in English sometimes differ than when you're talking in Spanish. How do you decide what you're going to say in which language, or does it come naturally? How does it work to switch language like that?
My brain just grabs whatever language. You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to form a thought, and sometimes it just, like, there's just some words that, like, me salen easier in Spanish. You know what I mean? Like, and then there's some things that just explain it perfectly in Spanish, but you can't translate it. And the same thing for English. So sometimes it's like, it's just there. You know what I mean? Like, a veces se me traba también. Like, I'll be like, oh, how do you say this in English? And it's like, I know I speak English well, but sometimes I'll get stuck, and I'll be like, I know it in Spanish, but I don't know it in English. But I don't know, probably the partying and the drinking. My brain's like, look, girl, you're going to get whatever language you get. Spanish was my first language. My parents both spoke only Spanish. So they, like later in life, they got English more, but in my house, it was just Spanish. I grew up thinking I was just going to be like my mom, like I thought I was going to speak like her. I was going to act like her. I was going to, but I realized, like, I'm Mexican American. So, like, sometimes I'm talking to my son who doesn't speak Spanish very well, and almost not at all. And I'm speaking English, and I'm like, I can't believe, like, this is me. Like, my son, I have to speak English to him. Like, who am I, So I'm going to definitely teach him Spanish because I think it's necessary. But se me fue el tren.
And, while growing up, you said your parents were undocumented. Did you ever get to travel outside of the U.S., come to Mexico, for vacation or visiting family or anything?
Yeah, every year my mom would send me to Mexico. Since I was 9, I've been traveling alone. Like, they would put the little pass on me, and they would just put me on a plane, and, I'm in Mexico. And then they pick me up, or we take the train, and then we get to the pueblito where my mom's from. So I always was in Mexico, and I was always in Mexico alone too. Like, because, like I said, my parents, they either worked or, the papers was a problem or whatever. So if I wanted to go, I would just go on my own. So I would spend like 3 months over there. I would go to school over there. Like, I always appreciated that part of myself, like being Mexican, being able to be in the rancho, being in the pueblo, like that was all I knew.
So that brings us to our next question. I saw you in Ceremonia in 2022 here in Mexico City. Mm-hmm. And you also played in Coca-Cola Flow Fest in 2021.
Yeah.
You have been in some of the biggest stages here in Mexico. What does it feel like for you to return to your roots, rapping in front of thousands of people in Mexico?
It feels amazing. I mean, in some ways, I feel like in Mexico, I'm still building, my career. I think I'm, in the U.S., I definitely have a lot of fans. And in other countries, I think I I'm getting there, but Mexico was always very important for me to build from the ground up and like really do it the correct way. So everything from like, you know, smaller podcasts to like, you know, going and linking up with different people in different cities or states to just really connect was important to me because, like I said, being Mexican, like Mexican descent, I just wanted to make sure I do stuff right. And I know that como mexicanos a veces somos muy orgullosos, and like sometimes people might be like, oh, like, you know, she didn't do it like that, or like she needs to, like, so pa que luego no anden diciendo nada. I'm like, dude, I'm gonna show up, I'm gonna do the little things just like the big things, and I'm gonna gain my fan base, you know, one fan at a time.
And speaking of, you know, big or small audiences, what do you think has been your favorite, you know, live performance? When did you feel most connected with the audience you were speaking to?
I mean, I feel like the, you know, this last tour called the Quinceañera I Never Had, I feel like that tour right there was very important to me, mostly because, you know, it was an emotional decision, like tour, and I really wanted to, like, you know, the Quince I Never Had, it really meant something to me, you know? It's like, it's bringing in culture. Traía mi suit de mariachi, salgo con el suit de mariachi, medio remix, y luego me pongo el vestido de quinceañera at the end. I really never had a quinceañera. I felt like I was just healing a lot of like childhood trauma with all that, and just doing it with the people, like I said, with the people that do love me, you know? Like, if I would have had a quinceañera when I was little, nobody would have gone. All my family, because they're undocumented, they would, you know, they would only be like in one city. They couldn't really travel over here or over there. So being able to do it now, kind of being funny, but also kind of being like, yo, like this is really like a healing thing. That was my favorite tour so far, because you know, I was a headliner. That's my fan base, and we really got to be, you know, emotional and just enjoy something that, you know, typically is reserved for family, but, you know, my fans are my family.
Tell us a little bit more about that tour. How many days? Where did you go? What did you enjoy the most and the least?
I feel like it was like 32 to 35. I don't know how many exactly, but they were all around the United States, you know, East Coast to West Coast. It was really dope, sold out, like, just, it was a really good experience. And like I said, my brother made this video where it like shows, you know, little mini VHS clips of like me growing up and stuff. So it just had a lot of emotion to it, you know. It was really something that I can like say when it comes to like my legacy, people will know, you know what I mean? Like that type of emotional roller coaster on stage with me is just kind of what it is, you know. I don't just go up there trying to rap my ass off. I mean, you know, we party, we open champagne, we do a bunch of that, but then also, you know, there's the emotional ride of like some of the songs I perform, you know, I'm laying down on the floor and I'm just singing, and like, you know, everybody gets their lighters up, and, you know, it's like just a lot of ups and downs. And I mean, that's just kind of what makes life good, right? So that's just what it was.
You know, you've mentioned your brother during this interview more than once. Do you work with him a lot?
Yeah, my brother, I joke that like Snow the Product is really like my brother and me like put together. Like, you know, I'm Claudia, like my personal life, or like me personally, I'm a little more reserved. Like that identity that I walk into when I'm Snow the Product is just, it's probably my alter ego, like who I wish I could be more like, you know. Like she's more just loud and confident, and like, you know, when I step on stage, you know, it's a different thing. Whereas me, you know, I grew up a little more shy, or like, you know, I'm scared for the most part. Right before I go on stage at festivals, I'm about to cry, you know, and then I go out there and then I just do my thing, but I get so nervous. And my brother, he does everything from, you know, we have a podcast together, he films and edits, like everything from personal content to, you know, even music videos, like just everything. Like we really work together every single day. And nothing, I'm really proud of him. And, you know, in a typical Mexican family, I feel like, you know, because I'm the older one, I'm the one who like pretty much raised him. And that's why we, you know, we think very similar, because we've been together all our freaking lives, you know.
You mentioned working with him a lot, and you not only work, you know, tirelessly as a musician, you know, you also release your music independently. And you're also, you know, you have a very active YouTube channel and a podcast. Like, how do all these platforms work together? When does one start and the other end?
Well, my podcast is Tuesdays at 6. So usually they're live streamed, but like I've started to pre-record some that way. Like, for example, right now, if I'm traveling, like it can still go. And then, yeah, just music, constantly working, traveling, working on music. I record myself. So I have my laptop and my little Apollo and my mic with me everywhere I go. So, if I'm doing a collab, I can just send them the vocals or record and nothing. I mean, it just all kind of goes because, like I said, we live together. I have a rancho in LA, and like my cousin, my brother, like they live there too. They have their like little spots. So to me, I feel like we can work together so well because we've made a life where it just all makes sense.
Yeah, and you use these platforms to promote your own work, right? Like it all comes in-house.
Yeah.
How does that work? How does that make you feel?
It's good. I mean, there's obviously artists that have millions and millions of dollars being poured into them in marketing and in, Spotify and everything. And with me, I mean, I do everything organically. As an independent artist, obviously I have to spend money as well, but I do like that, like, I'm in a phase of my career, or like I'm in a place, at least as a person, where I don't think that I was trying to be the biggest artist in the world. I'm trying to be a happy artist. I'm trying to be a happy person. I'm trying to, get my music out, get my voice out, get the message out. But I'm really trying not to compare or not to let anything ruin what I've worked so hard for, because I think it's a known fact I'm one of the best female rappers. Like I really am, like I'm bilingual as well. Like you said, it's like seamless. So I really don't think I have anything to prove other than make good music, make good collaborations, and just move through the world the way that I have been, just, hopefully grow a little more. But other than that, like, I'm pretty happy with where I'm at. I don't want to let anything rob me of my joy of creating a pretty successful life with my family.
You're right now in a spot where you can say that you're a happy artist. Do you think that you have reached the point that you have been dreaming about, when you were growing up?
Yeah, I think so. I think some of the stuff that I do nowadays, it's like, dang, like little me would have, like, this is what I wanted to do. So like I got it, like I don't think I necessarily did all this for the money as much as I did it to prove to myself that I was going to do this, that I was going to live a life, that was not just regular. I didn't just want to go to work and go home and like, be sad or whatever. Like I wanted to, and that's fine for everybody if that's what you want to do. Like in this, I have my own rat race, in this, you have your own, you release a song and then next thing you know, in less than a month, you have to release another one and you have to do the same. So I just wanted to be content with my type of life. And if I want to get up and go and record a song, in Colombia and then go record a song somewhere else, like I wanted to just be able to do that. I wanted to show my son the world. I want to, just be able to connect with like-minded individuals and represent and probably be the voice for some little girl that like probably feels like I did when I was little and I didn't have necessarily somebody that could say certain things, and to me, I think that's it. I think the cross-section between me being queer, me being Latina, being Mexican, being bilingual, being Mexican-American, growing up in California, like all these things are just such specific things that don't necessarily have representation in hip-hop and in music. And if they do, it's pretty small. Trust me, I've been fighting for it for years. So I just think that's the biggest thing. Other than that, I'm trying to show people too that like, music is a job still. So I share my job and my career and rap with my fans, but I also share my personal life. I'm home with my kid and the chickens and the dogs and the goats and, like what we do there. And, I just try to show the human aspect of being an artist because, like I said, it's a job and it has its own rat race and I don't want to get caught up in it. So I try to make sure that I make room for being a human being and just a regular person within all of it,
We'll be back with our interview with Snow Tha Product after a short break. Snow Tha Product sat with our team to talk about her career and how she manages to grow as an artist without the support of a major label. And it was this way that she was able to collaborate with one of the biggest artists of our time.
So, you mentioned, traveling around, recording in studios in Colombia or, wherever, far away from home is my point. And, one of these endeavors took you to work with one of the most prestigious and popular producers, in the contemporary urban scene right now, in the game, Bizarrap. I wanted to ask you a little bit about what that experience was like, starting from the beginning. Like, how did you two meet? When was the starting point?
We had talked on Instagram, through DM briefly, but not, nothing really like crazy or whatever. And I think out of nowhere, he was like, hey, do you want to do a session? I was like, what the hell? Yes, hell yeah. And he was like, well, if you can get here, by this day, then, we can do it. And I was like, hell yeah. So I just got on a plane and left. That's what I mean by being independent. I love that at any moment, if an opportunity comes up, I could just go, you know what I mean? Obviously, sometimes I'm busy, but for the most part, I know that I can prioritize if something is an opportunity that just came up. And sometimes it does. Sometimes, major artists, there's been times when maybe there was a plan to work with somebody and then that person didn't come through for them. And then they're like, yo, there's space. And I'll be like, ay boy, fuck it. I think some of the best opportunities have happened like that. It's the same way that I did a collab with Aleman, and we had a really great song. And that was just he was like, yo, pull up. And I pulled up just by myself. I just went all to Mexico, bought my plane ticket, and I just worked on the song. And I think I love that about this. I love being spontaneous. I love opportunities just rolling up. I love what we did with Bizarrap. I knew it was going to be a big deal. I didn't know it was going to be that big of a deal. So I just I took it all in stride. I was excited for people to have liked it. And a lot of famous people reached out, and they were like, yo, that was hard. And that was really cool because it kind of gave me that cosign that, all I did was rap. All I did was do what I do, and for it to be that big, it means I can do it. It's just getting eyes on it. That's all.
And how long did it take you to write and arrange this song? You kind of described how you got a plane, got there, started rapping, but how did the writing of the song work? What was it like working with him?
He's very detail oriented. So he really, everything from the video to the sound to, oh, maybe that word, change it or whatever. He was just very hands on. And to me, I appreciated that because sometimes as an artist, we're so we get told, do whatever you want. And I do like when producers are they have an opinion, because it helps mold the whole thing. And no, all I can say about Bisa is he's talented and he's as big as he is because he cares that much. Every single detail, lighting to angle of the camera to just every single thing. And I learned a lot from working with him. So it was awesome.
And you've said this song, took you farther than you thought, right? Mm-hmm. I've seen some of your set lists, and the song with Bizarrap is usually the closing song for your shows, right?
Yeah.
How does it work? How does it feel? To be singing that song in front of a huge audience. Does it take you back to that place where you recorded? What do you think of when you're singing that song?
Yeah, definitely. Especially in other countries, I feel like that's the one that they really know me more for. In English, I feel like my fan base knows a lot of my songs, but it makes me proud that that I did that and that it was a pretty prolific one. I think a lot of people usually mention it among the better ones of the Bizarrap sessions, and to me that's a freaking compliment because even having one, he doesn't invite just anyone, so it was a compliment to go there to represent. I mean, me saying the whole Mexicana Tremendo flow was very it was very organic, but at the same time, it was cool to see people from everywhere, every other country be like, "Soy Mexicana Tremendo flow," it was cool because sometimes there's some Latinos that don't necessarily appreciate Mexicans. So it's cool for me to go and wave the flag real high and have people like it,
And you've collaborated with Bizarrap. You mentioned working with Aleman as well. What would be the collaboration of your dreams? Even if they're already, dead, who would you love working with?
I mean, shoot, there's lot of people. I feel like, little me would have liked to work with like Gloria Trevi or like Shakira or something. Those were the two women that like I would sing their songs with my broom and, just act like I was them. But, obviously Missy Elliott, Timberland, a lot of different artists in like English that are really dope. But I don't know. Also just, whatever ends up happening, I feel like I'm pretty free spirited in that like I wake up every day and I still think that any random day I can get a call and somebody like will be like, yo, like go to this studio, and then like it could be something really cool. So I don't know. I don't think about it as much as I just wake up excited that any day I'm gonna get some pretty cool collaborations that I won't even know that I was gonna do.
And you mentioned singing in the broom, impersonating Gloria Trevi or others. What are you listening to right now? Like when you go in the shower in the morning, like what are you singing? What?
Oh man. I listen to Jay Cortez. I listen to Sech. I listen to a lot of reggaeton. I love Bad Bunny. I love Drake. Just their music. Bryson Tiller. A lot of R&B. I like very like singy stuff, which is funny because people always are like, they probably think I want to listen to like super aggressive rap or something, and every time that they tell me to get in the studio, they want me to just like aggressively rap, and I'm like, I actually like like singing stuff, but yeah, I don't know,
catchy melodies.
yeah, and then I have anxiety, so I like music that can calm me down.
Absolutely. And speaking about kind of anxiety, how do you represent that in your lyrics, in your songs? Like, do you kind of have a therapy through this, through music writing and rapping as a way to better mental health?
Yeah, I think so. I express a lot of my, but I think mostly when I talk about mental health and stuff, I do it like through my podcast or through interviews and stuff, or just on TikTok. I go live and I just say things. But I definitely feel like my music. Yeah, I've put it in there before. Some of my earlier projects, I talked a lot more about it, but I don't know. I have the duality of like, sometimes my music is really party, and you're doing all this like party reggaeton turn up stuff, and then I have my more heartbroken or like mental health stuff, and it's just whatever I'm feeling at the moment.
And you're in Miami right now. What took you there? What are you working on?
I came for the premios that I'm gonna go to, but other than that, I figured I was gonna do some music. I wanted to come to Miami. Like I had told my manager, I'm like, I don't know, but I've been traveling and I've been working, and I just need a trip to Miami. I'll record. I'll just let loose and just get ready for the year. February usually is like, ya ahora ya arrancamos, and then we're going to spring and summer. Next thing you know, I'll be on tour. Like I just wanted to be out here and see where life takes me. But I did bring my studio, and I got a nice view and I can record some music.
You mentioned starting a new tour right now. What else can we expect from Snowed Up Product in 2024? What are you working on right now?
I think a lot of new music, some cool collaborations that are dropping, same of everything though, going on tour, doing festivals, just living life, and just, showing by example that, you can come from wherever you come from, and you can be whoever, and as long as, you're honest, you'll eventually, find your place.
What other advice can you maybe give to somebody who's starting a career like you started some years ago?
I would say as long as you know why you're doing it, if you're getting into music because you want to be the most famous person in the world, like you're probably in the wrong business, and it's going to be pretty disappointing. I think the message and, having something to offer the world with like, music or like influence or just like some sort of inspirational something, that's usually what leads to a fulfilled career. But sometimes when you meet someone and they're like, I don't know, I just want to be famous, you're just like, wow, like that's pretty empty. Like you probably have to do some work internally to figure it out, figure out what exactly you even want that for. But I would say, if you love music and you would do it even if you were on the street, then do music, because that's what's going to make you happy.
Snowed Up Product, thank you very, very much.
Thank you too. Bye.
As I said earlier, it's the ambition, the talent, and the hard work that can take you a long way, even if you start desde abajo, from the bottom. These values have taken Snow the Product to shine not only in music. She's also a talented actress that you can see as Lil T in the show Queen of the South. And watch out, she might end up doing that collab of her dreams with Missy Elliott. This was the last episode of El Flow Season 2. We explored fascinating topics in the reggaeton and urban genres. We chronicled the path to stardom of some of the biggest players in the game, such as Daddy Yankee. We documented how up-and-coming artists like La Nota Culichi and Chico Curlyhead are rising to fame. We witnessed how women are changing the rules with a more inclusive approach to a male-dominated genre. And we said goodbye with this interview with one of our favorite artists. This was an epic trip into the depths of our favorite music. And it was a sweet ride filled with emotions and excitement. Stay tuned for more news about your favorite reggaeton podcast. I am Lilia Luciano, and this was El Flow Season 2. As always, it's been a pleasure. Gracias por escuchar.
The second season of El Flow was written and produced by Álvaro Céspedes and Reynold Gutierrez in partnership with iHeart's My Cultura podcast network and is hosted by me, Lilia Luciano. Edited by Carmen Graterol. Fact-checking by Samedi Aguirre. Executive producers are Carmen Graterol, Rose Reed, Isaac Lee, and Lilia Luciano. Sound design by Pachi Quiñones, Hugo Mendoza, and Gonzalo Messi. Special thanks to Verónica Hernández and Pedro Aguirre. Our executive producers at iHeart are Giselle Vances and Arlene Santana. For more My Cultura podcasts, listen to the iHeart Radio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your favorite shows.